Okay, let's unpack this.
Welcome back to the deep dive.
Today we are undertaking a deep dive that, well, it operates entirely outside the usual parameters of our source material. We are not analyzing market trends or, political history.
No, not at all. We're diving straight into the architectural blueprints of consciousness itself.
Specifically, we're analyzing a guidebook written for those the author defines as conscious foreseers and deep intuitives.
And this is a really highly specialized text. If you are listening to this and you're someone who consistently senses these deep underlying currents, the structures of meaning, the trajectories of future events, all before they become tangible or even explainable, this blueprint is likely written for you.
You're probably already neck deep in self-inquiry.
Exactly. And the mission of this source is to provide a comprehensive structural map for your inner transformation journey.
So our mission today is to provide a crucial shortcut. For you, the learner, we want to cut through some of the complexity and let you quickly grasp the structural reasons why your deep intuitive wiring consistently creates friction.
And it can be painful friction.
Oh, absolutely. Painful friction with the conventional world.
Right.
We're not just stopping at the pain point, though. We are charting the rigorous, practice-oriented path from that structural friction all the way to harnessing your integrated whole true self.
What's immediately striking about this source material is its refusal to engage with typical self-help premises.
Right.
The author issues a sharp warning right at the beginning. This text is not designed for quick fixes, nor is it here to, validate or confirm personality labels. It operates at a depth that transcends modern psychological classifications.
It's functioning on a different floor entirely. It's written from what the author calls a phenomenological perspective. So what does that mean?
It means it's based on the lived, the felt, the experienced reality of these processes. It's not just theory.
And it draws heavily on Jungian depth psychology, and it aligns seamlessly with later stage developmental models like Ken Wilber's integral theory and the stages model of adult development.
Critically, it focuses entirely on understanding inner structures of awareness.
Not surface-level beliefs or habits or what you've achieved externally.
Precisely. And this leads to the immediate barrier the author sets up to the reader, which we have to warn you about. The language is intentionally abstract, maybe unfamiliar, and at times, it's designed to feel utterly disorienting.
Okay, that's where I want to pause, because that word, disorientation, that's usually associated with the failure of communication, right?
Normally, yes. But the source argues the exact opposite.
How so?
The author explains that for the deep intuitive, disorientation is not a failure of understanding. It's an intentional design feature.
A feature, not a bug.
Exactly. It's an invitation for construct awareness to activate. If the material were immediately comfortable and rational, you'd just consume it passively.
You'd just fit it into your existing mental boxes. You'd process it like an audio textbook.
Precisely. The disorientation forces you to engage the material, not through quick rational consumption, but through deeper sensing, inner recognition, and a willingness to let meaning emerge and unfold on its own timeline.
So if you rush it, you're missing the point.
If you rush the clarity, you are bypassing the very intuitive capacity the work is trying to build and stabilize. This text, unlike most, demands active participation from your entire being, not just your intellect.
Okay, let's start with the diagnosis then. The fundamental issue the source identifies for deep intuitive is what they term structural friction. That phrase is incredibly powerful. What is the architecture of this friction?
Structural friction describes a profound, often chronic tension. It's the lived experience when an individual's internal capacity for consciousness.
Their ability to see things.
Yeah, their ability to sense structures, patterns, underlying meaning. When that capacity exceeds the dominant structures of meaning available in their immediate social or professional environment.
So, in essence, the deep intuitive's internal awareness can identify content, structures, systems of awareness that exist before and beyond the forms that are generally recognized or validated by the broader society.
The author just calls that the world.
So if I see the underlying algorithm of the company I work for, but my boss only sees the spreadsheet, that gap between us, that's structural friction.
That's a perfect analogy. You are perceiving the structure, the deep pattern. They're only seeing the content, the superficial manifestation. And this leads directly to the author's definition of the world as the socially constructed mind.
Let's break down that collective pattern, the socially constructed mind. What does that really entail?
Think of it as the universal operating system, It's the ego structure that's been molded and defined by cultural norms, shared language, your family, large-scale institutions like education and government.
It's the air we breathe, culturally speaking.
It is. And it's absolutely necessary for social functioning. It provides the rules, the norms, the boundaries we need for communities to even exist. Historically, it was optimized for external functioning, surface-level rationality, and conformity, all to maintain stability.
We needed to buy groceries, pass laws, and organize traffic. Simple stuff. But you mentioned the cost earlier. Where did this necessary structure go wrong for the intuitive?
Well, in prioritizing this hyper-rational, external, measurable framework, the other parts of us, the intuitive, imaginative, subjective, and instinctive sides of consciousness, they were systematically pushed out. Marginalized and forced into hiding. They were classified, often in childhood and certainly within our educational systems, as childish, unrealistic, or just useless in the pursuit of productivity.
I think a lot of people listening will feel that in their bones.
This suppression and institutional denial of inner reality is the core mechanism that creates and perpetuates structural friction.
It sounds like the intuitive is constantly trying to operate in a world that denies, 50% of their actual self?
At least. And this makes the internal process of individuation not a luxury, but a mandatory survival tool.
A structural necessity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For conscious foreseers, the lifelong Jungian process of individuation, which is just integrating that unconscious, disowned material into your conscious awareness, it isn't optional. Without this self-work, their primary gifts, their intuition and foresight, they just remain distorted, painful, or completely latent.
So individuation is the only way the intuitive can consciously separate themselves from that collective conditioning.
And reclaim those disowned, shadowed aspects of the psyche that the socially constructed mind just threw away.
The source material gives a fantastic and honestly kind of painful example of this friction using Jungian typology. It focuses specifically on the ni-dominant types, like the INTJ and the INFJ.
It's a brilliant illustration of why these types often feel so profoundly and consistently unseen. Let's take the ni-dom, so introverted intuition dominant.
Right.
Their primary strength, the pure ni, is where the deep knowing, the structural sensing, the foresight, and the complex patterns all emerge. The author estimates this accounts for approximately 50% of their true cognitive capacity.
So half of their being is this massive internal world of profound insight.
A world that is almost impossible to articulate directly.
And that's the problem, isn't it? They have to communicate this vast, complex 50% insight to the external world using their auxiliary function.
Correct. For the INTJ, that's extroverted thinking or teleologic of organization. For the INFJ, it's extroverted feeling, fed the logic of harmony and values. This auxiliary function, their external strength, is where they operate, but the author estimates they only utilize it at about 30% of their overall potential capacity.
So we have the 50% massive internal insight, which they have to communicate through a 30% external mechanism. And the structural friction happens because the socially constructed mind, the world, only sees and hears the 30% output.
Precisely. They are fundamentally reduced to less than half of what they actually are. They spend their careers, their relationships, their conversations trying to articulate a massive, complex vision through a filter that is optimized for efficiency and surface structure.
Which leads to them feeling deeply misunderstood, frustrated, and ultimately profoundly unseen.
I want to focus on the emotional pain this causes, because that 50-30 reduction isn't just a mental math problem. In the workplace, this often means the intuitive is constantly explaining their insight in rational terms, only to have the complexity rejected because the explanation is filtered through a framework, te or fe, that misses the core intuitive leap of ni.
They can't show their work because the work was a flash of insight.
Exactly. It leads to what the source calls chronic self-betrayal. They know a complex future or a structural solution or a deep truth, but they have to simplify it so radically for that 30% external framework that they end up betraying the original insight just to be heard.
And that directly impacts their self-image, their career path. They might be brilliant strategists but get rejected for leadership roles because their true strength, the no, is invisible to the existing organizational structure. They can't quantify it.
And this experience is also what makes them uniquely positioned to critique normal life. They don't just dislike conformity, they see through its superficiality. They interpret the traditional path as a misinterpretation of deeper conditioned values.
They see how these values operate under unconscious, often authoritarian control.
Yes, frequently accepting inequality or meaninglessness without even realizing they have a choice.
So this is why the urgency of the text exists. If you find yourself perpetually seeing through the accepted rules of your environment, feeling that society is missing the point entirely, this structural analysis is designed to resonate.
The author is describing that internal landscape. If, however, you found fulfillment within existing social expectations, you may lack the necessary structural tension to really engage with this text.
And crucially, the author emphasizes that this entire framework, structural friction, the 50-30 rule, it's strictly descriptive of consciousness patterns.
Yes, this is so important. It is not an ideological critique of capitalism or a personal attack on individuals who conform. It's simply an impartial description of the underlying structures of awareness.
It just highlights why those whose personal development has not yet structurally exceeded the demands and expectations of modern society, they might not resonate with this.
They haven't yet reached the point where this tension becomes a necessary problem demanding a radical solution. The intuitive must solve this problem to integrate their soul into service for the collective.
So the pain of the friction is the engine of evolution.
Exactly. It forces the intuitive to look beyond the content of their life, their job, their relationships, and start to look at the structure of their own mind.
That structural pain, that feeling of being reduced to 30% of your capacity, is what drives the intuitive away from static labels. Which brings us to section 2, where the author immediately redefines Jungian typology.
They are very clear on this. Types are fundamentally unimportant.
Which is a shocking thing to read in a text that uses typology.
It is, because focusing on them leads to separation, identity fixation, and a split of consciousness. The author pulls the rug out from under any listener who came here looking for a deeper description of their MBTI type.
Right. They stress that wholeness is the starting point. Typology isn't a fixed definition of who you are.
It's a dynamic map of the consciousness structures available to you. If you use your type label to define your limitations, oh, I can't do that, I'm an introvert, you've missed the entire point of later stage development.
And the source is quite critical of traditional MBTI tests, suggesting they are only designed for modern egocentric consciousness.
And they completely neglect the dynamic importance of the shadow functions, the third and fourth positions in the type stack.
Which, as we'll see, are the most important for growth.
That neglect is precisely why the standard models break down when you try to use them for deep internal transformation. The author demands we return to Jung's original, deeper vision. Cognitive functions, thinking, feeling, sensing, intuition, are not just traits of individual personality.
They're archetypes.
Yes. They are underlying transcendental structures that operate below personal consciousness. They dynamically generate the types and the conditioning patterns we experience as individuals.
So whether my intuition is well-developed or not isn't just about my personal effort alone. It's about how integrated my entire psychic structure is and how I relate to these fundamental archetypes.
That's it. Our personal history, our conditioning, and our level of consciousness integration determine how we relate to the experiences emerging from this collective unconscious. The advanced view the author introduces is that functions are underlying transcendental structures of awareness.
They are the formative patterns that build up our personal experiences.
Exactly.
Now, this sounds incredibly abstract. How does the author ground this? They make some fascinating connections here, referencing both the four-quadrant model from integral theory and Jung's identification of the four alchemical transitions.
No.2, albedo, citronitis, and rubido.
Right. What's the significance of that connection?
These aren't just throwaway mystical references. They are structural markers. They signify that human evolution, at its cutting edge, has always been aware of four fundamental structures of consciousness that must be integrated for wholeness.
So this isn't a new idea. It's ancient wisdom being reframed.
And the text states that the work is specifically made for intuitives operating at the fourth and fifth person perspectives. Only from these vantage points can one begin to navigate these deep archetypes through personal content while simultaneously observing the entire structural framework.
Let's ground those perspectives for our listener. The fourth and fifth person perspectives sound like advanced spiritual concepts. What does it actually mean practically to operate from those viewpoints?
Okay, let's use a simple metaphor. If most people operate from the first person, my personal feelings, or second person, our relationship.
Me and you.
Right. The third person perspective is like looking at a system from the outside. A manager looking at the organizational chart, you see the parts and how they relate.
Okay, I'm with you.
The fourth-person perspective goes deeper. It's the ability to observe entire systems, contexts, and overarching patterns that govern the organization. You don't just see the chart, you see why the chart was designed that way, its history, its biases, and who benefits from it.
So the fourth person sees the entire forest and understands the ecosystem. What does the fifth person see?
The fifth-person perspective adds a crucial layer: awareness of how meaning, identity, and perception themselves are constructed.
Wow.
It is the ability to see the system and simultaneously understand that the idea of the system is just a construction of consciousness. When you operate here, you are moving from identity-based knowing, I am my INTJ type, to consciousness-based knowing, my type is a temporary structure of consciousness that I'm utilizing.
That pivot moving from identification with the structure to awareness of the structure brings us to the core conceptual insight of the source material. This is the crucial differentiation between content and structure.
This is it. If a listener takes only one concept from this deep dive, this might be the one.
So let's define them. Content.
Content refers to the actual mental experiences that appear in consciousness. The specific thoughts, the vivid intuitions, the images, the sensations, the emotions. It's the stuff of the experience.
And structure.
Structure is the unseen underlying pattern, the framework, or the system that is generating that content. Let's use a dream analogy. The content of the dream is the specific story. The monster, the house, the dialogue.
Right.
The structure is the underlying tension, the archetypal pattern of fear or self-repression, the psychic framework that caused that specific story to manifest in the first place.
So the intuition itself, the sudden, specific realization about the future, that's content. The archetypal function, the I, that organized and generated that flash of insight, that's the structure.
Exactly. And the crucial developmental shift occurs the moment the intuitive realizes those powerful visions, feelings, and insights they cherish, the very things that define their identity, are just mental content.
They are not their fundamental essence.
They are not. That realization sounds terrifyingly liberating, doesn't it?
It does. It feels like letting go of everything you thought you were.
It is. That realization is the genesis of deep, abiding detachment. You recognize that your functions are magnificent structures experienced directly through conscious awareness, but they are not the thing itself. They are tools. They don't reveal the core essence of who you are, which is the pure capacity of awareness itself. This structural clarity is what you need to create from a place of witnessing, rather than from a place of egoic projection.
So if the first two sections describe the problem, structural fiction, and the map typology as structures, then section 3 describes the actual path forward. And that path, according to the source, runs directly through the shadow.
It does. We must embrace the evolutionary sequence, starting with the power of the third function.
The third function is the bridge, right? It sits precisely between the conscious and the fully unconscious.
It is. Using our NIDM examples, for the INTJ, that's introverted feeling, phi. For the INFJ, it's introverted thinking, T. The author argues this is the key to later stage development because this is the function where we explore the patterns and the psychological material that were neglected in childhood.
This is the access point to the wounded child, the part of the psyche that had to be suppressed or disowned to adapt to the rules and expectations of the dominant social environment.
Usually represented by the parental or educational context. The subject here is vast. Historically, our mental evolution, especially in Western society, hyper-preferred thinking and sensing, supported by industrialized educational and professional systems.
The things you can measure.
Exactly. That decision created a massive societal neglect of subjective feeling awareness, the soul, and the spirit. Science became purely materialistic, and religion often devolved into rigid dogma, both avoiding the subjective truth of existence.
And this collective neglect, the source argues, creates a powerful evolutionary pull. They call it the third attractor.
The third attractor is the driving force toward integrated, non-dual consciousness. It's a collective interior that demands the inclusion of spirit and feeling alongside reason. It is not experienced as a belief system.
It's a felt sense.
It's a lived movement that functionally integrates body, mind, reason, feeling, and intuition together. It seeks both-hand coherence, transcending the limits of the binary either thinking that defines earlier stages. It is truly the next necessary leap in human evolution.
But this internal shift sounds fraught with peril. The source material issues a severe risk warning at this stage.
It's a very severe warning.
If the intuitive begins prioritizing the feeling subject and the deep interior without sufficient consciousness integration and structural awareness, they risk self-nihilism and narcissism.
This is a crucial challenge, and the source is very specific about it. The intuitive, feeling trapped by the world, that structural friction, can become so enamored with their internal complexity that they believe their unique insights are exempt from external reality checks.
So they get lost in their own inner world.
And that neglect of objective structure and external integration leads to self-referential systems or just chaos rather than true growth.
So what specific safeguards or feedback loops does this text suggest to ensure the intuitive doesn't fall into the trap of spiritual narcissism when they are finally embracing this deep inner feeling world? That's a severe risk.
The primary safeguard is a commitment to the fourth and fifth person perspectives we discussed earlier, the observation of structure. The author states that true feeling integration, phi or TA, must be immediately balanced by a rigorous, objective interrogation of one's own mental models.
Construct awareness.
Yes. If you are using your feeling to reject external feedback without acknowledging the structures you are projecting onto others, you are in narcissism. The other critical safeguard is the explicit commitment to the seven-step iterative loop, which we'll discuss next, because that loop forces self-reflection and alignment with a greater purpose that transcends personal ego satisfaction.
So the resolution of the world issue requires integrating the very shadowed projections that made the intuitive feel like a victim of the world in the first place.
Exactly. And once that interior integration of the third function is underway, the focus inevitably shifts to the inferior or fourth function. This is the practical manifestation.
Bringing that integrated self out into reality.
For the NEDOMs, that's extroverted sensing, say.
To the sensory, physical, in-the-moment reality. That is traditionally the weakest and most repressed function for the deep intuitive.
Which is why it is the inevitable integration required to consciously express the new, higher self in the world. The author describes this as necessary for actualization. Without this, the deep insight remains a secret, trapped inside the inner world, never made visible or actionable.
I love the mythological language the author uses here, connecting it to the hero returning from the mountaintop. The hero doesn't stay on the peak, they must return to the village.
It's the ultimate spiritual challenge. The integration is the necessary return back to the body in the physical world, but it's not a return to the old body or the old world. It's a shift to an evolved, spiritualized body, metaphorically and literally, a body capable of holding and expressing the new structural awareness.
So this mythological resonance emphasizes that the transformation must be made visible, acknowledged, and applied in physical reality.
It has to be.
And this integration is what the author terms avatar creation. It sounds like more than just starting a company or writing a book.
It is the ability to manifest one's life, work visibly and creatively in a way that serves the collective. Whether that takes the form of writing, developing a novel business model, creating art, or building an organization, it doesn't matter. The fourth function, often resisted because it feels too mundane or physical, provides the necessary container.
The creative expression.
The creative expression to communicate and serve the profound collective consciousness accessed within. Without the fourth function integration, the insight is purely internal. It satisfies only the intuitive's personal joy, but it doesn't enter the collective field where it can contribute to evolution.
That brings us to the ultimate outcome. Once this rigorous work is complete and all four functions have been consciously integrated, what happens to the intuitive's identity? Does the INTJ just disappear?
Once all four functions have taken a new, post-egoic, transcendental, formless form within your consciousness, the intuitive operates as a relational field.
A relational field.
They move beyond conflict, beyond rigid identification with type, and their reality is no longer limited by the assumptions of their conditioned personality. They are creating their life fluidly along the way, rather than constantly battling old conditioned patterns. The solidified ego structure dissolves, allowing the ego to become the humble, effective servant of the true self.
The message here is so clear. This is not passive transformation. This journey requires conscious effort and persistent engagement.
The source material is adamant about this. Intuition is the calling of the true self, but it requires participation-conscious, daily practice to unfold and stabilize.
And the author is blunt. The persistent lack of listening to that inner calling is what causes the deep depression, anxiety, and self-betrayal so common among intuitives.
They possess the answer but refuse to engage the hard work of actualizing it. You cannot simply wait for insight. You must actively engage the process of integration.
So where does the practice begin? The foundational step is living embodied presence, or LEP. How does this differ from standard mindfulness meditation?
Standard mindfulness is often about observing content, watching your thoughts float by, or achieving a temporary state of calm. LEP is much deeper. It is an undivided, sustained realization of the true self.
It's a stabilized mode of being.
Yes, not a temporary peak state or relaxation technique. The author describes it as the mother ground that holds, accepts, and integrates everything that arises without judgment or dissociation. It's an energetic, structural stabilization.
How does the deep intuitive apply this in daily life, especially given the natural tendency to be, disembodied, lost in the future?
The daily application is intense. It is the conscious, continuous practice of learning to live with and witness everything alive in you.
Everything.
Literally every sensation, every thought stream, every emotional shift, especially the unknown and the uncertainty. You do this in every moment of every day. It's your daily meditation in action intended to dissolve those dysfunctional self-made boundaries that create structural friction and resistance. LEP is the bedrock. It ensures that the structural growth practices that follow have a stable platform to operate from.
Okay, so once that mother ground is established, we move to the first major structural growth model, phase 1, the 7-step iterative loop. The author specifies this is nonlinear and recursive.
Designed to force the intuitive to become their own primary teacher.
This loop is the heart of self-leadership and integration. It acknowledges that transformation is not a checklist, but a repeating, deepening cycle.
Right.
Let's walk through the steps, emphasizing the practical difficulty of each one, because just listing them makes them sound too simple. Step 1. Notice what is present. This is more than just observing your environment, right?
Absolutely. This requires cultivating inner silence, a quiet space, and recognizing the awareness and movement before you label it. It's about recognizing the felt sense of tension or the movement of a new idea while intentionally staying in that flow of awareness.
And the challenge here is patience.
Huge challenge.
Yeah.
The intuitive often wants to jump immediately to step 2, to the information gathering.
Right. So step 2, seeking the information. You've noticed the movement. Now what?
This is where you take conscious inner leadership. You acknowledge the presence you found in step 1 and consciously look for all necessary sources to integrate it. This might be internal, accessing deep intuitive insight. It might be external, a book, a conversation, a new course. The key is active inquiry aligned with that initial presence.
Then step 3, use the knowledge information found. Simple enough, apply it. If you learn something new about communication, try it out.
Precisely. This is the integration in action. You have to embody the insight to see its effect.
Then we hit step 4, reflect on the outcomes. This is where the ego loves to jump in and judge. Did I do it right? Did I fail?
And the author clarifies that this reflection is not for egoic validation. It's about critically assessing what happened and aligning your choices with your greater purpose, leading to what they call soulful validation.
Did the choice move you closer to your deep inner purpose, or was it merely expedient or self-serving?
Exactly. This feedback loop is what prevents the development of the self-nihilism and narcissism we discussed earlier.
Step 5. Stop to inquire, see, and reflect on what is being born or becoming. This feels like the most difficult step for the goal-oriented intuitive. It demands a significant slowdown.
It does. It requires stepping out of the action loop entirely. You're looking for the whole or the bigger entity that is emerging from the 4 previous steps. You are listening for a truth that is beyond your immediate personal desire or ambition. This is the realignment phase, sensing the purpose of the structure itself.
And that leads to step 6, setting new purposes based on those internally realigned goals.
Crucially, because you have listened to that bigger entity, these new purposes are often beyond the purely personal realm. They're designed to serve the collective consciousness and the evolution of the whole, rather than just optimizing your personal life.
And finally, step 7, recognize completions. This means noticing when the structure you started with in step 1 has resolved itself.
How do you know it's a real completion and you're not just, bored of the problem?
That's a great question.
It's the subtle but profound realization that an inquiry, a conflict, or a tension that has been present in your awareness for years has simply disappeared from your daily speech, your emotional life, or your thought patterns. It's the mythical death and rebirth, the natural dissolution of a structure that has been fully integrated. This loop is inherently challenging. It demands persistence, patience, and absolute trust in your own inner unfolding.
Once that rigorous 7-step loop is in motion, the intuitive moves to phase 2, increasing construct awareness. This is where the structural understanding really solidifies.
Construct awareness is the foundational mental shift, moving from living within your beliefs and perceptions to consciously noticing how meaning, identity, and perception were being formed in real time.
You're seeing the code behind the program.
Exactly. It's recognizing that thoughts, beliefs, and mental frameworks are constructed and provisional, not inherently real or fixed truths. This awareness is the ultimate antidote to spiritual bypass and absolutist thinking.
And the practical application for the listener. How do you increase construct awareness today, right now?
You learn to listen to the inner landscape as an operating system. You listen to the inner comments, the visions, the images that appear, treating them as data generated by a structure, not as ultimate truth. The author recommends rigorously observing the continuous interplay of foreground and background in your awareness.
What's foregrounded in my attention right now? What am I consciously prioritizing?
And conversely, what is backgrounded or denied? What is inside, outside, above, or below my current mental focus? Even the language you habitually use, the judgments, the certainties, the metaphors, will reveal your hidden mental models and the meaning-making structures you are operating within. If you realize your language constantly uses competitive, warlike metaphors, you see the structure of your perception.
This shift directly precedes and aids the awakening of the witness. The source material suggests witnessing emerges as shadow projections and introjections become recognizable.
The shadow work required in the third function loop clears the way. That recognition, seeing your projection as yours, can happen in the moment for those operating structurally at the fifth-person perspective, or upon later reflection for those at the fourth-person level. Phenomenologically, the witness is often described like a stable, reflective awareness arising from behind your shoulder.
Which is a metaphor for a radical shift in vantage point.
Yes. Is the witness just passive observation, though? Or does it contribute to growth?
That's the question.
It is much more than passive observation. The source states that intuition, when harnessed correctly, leads to the higher mind, and the higher mind includes the witness. The witness is the ordinary mind structure that you have rigorously chosen to grow up on your developmental journey.
So it's an achievement, not a given.
It's a mechanism that stabilizes fleeting spiritual or intellectual experiences into collective consciousness over time. The goal is to move from unconscious awareness, where intuition merely operates through you, often distorted by shadow, to conscious witnessed utilization.
And that transformation results in objective intuition. That's a fascinating term. We usually think of intuition as inherently subjective. How does one verify the objectivity of their intuition?
The term objective here means freed from projection and freed from egoic identification, not detached or cold. Intuition becomes objective when it is consistently witnessed through the framework of construct awareness, ensuring it is no longer reinforcing old conditioning or personal biases. The verification comes through the 7-step loop, the reflection on outcomes in step 4, and the alignment with greater purpose in step 6.
Can you give me a practical, grounded example of how objective intuition manifests differently in the real world compared to ordinary subjective insight?
Sure. Subjective intuition might give you a powerful gut feeling that a business deal will fail because the lead negotiator reminds you of your father who betrayed you. The emotional content is compelling, but it is a projection.
Right. It's about you, not the deal.
Objective intuition, having been witnessed and structurally filtered, will provide the same data. The deal will fail, but the accompanying feeling will be clear, dispassionate foresight, connected to the structural reality of the organization.
Like a poor financial model or misaligned values.
Exactly, not to your personal history. When intuition is objective, it reflects reality as it is truly unfolding, allowing it to guide genuine evolution, not just perpetuate personal drama. The deep intuitive is already unconsciously aware of their witnessing capacity, but the practice makes it conscious, bridging the inner world with the external application required for avatar creation.
This has been an incredibly rigorous and structural deep dive into the internal architecture of the intuitive. The question the author used to frame the entire work, how to be recognized by the world without hiding the soul.
It's a powerful question.
And it's truly resolved not by asking the world to change, but by the rigor of this internal work.
The source material fundamentally reveals that the desire for external recognition is often just a question of resolving the deep intuitive's most common shadow pattern. The structures, the false self-identities, and the projections that keep them hiding, limited, and trapped in that structural friction we started with.
The key takeaway for me is the constant movement. This is not about achieving a fixed state, like a perfect personality type, and then stopping. The development is continuous.
The explicit goal is not to create another solid, stable ego structure, which is what earlier developmental stages aim for. The goal is to constantly transcend limiting patterns, allowing the integrated ego to become the humble, flexible, and powerful servant of the true self.
Intuition is who you are becoming.
But you cannot become a conscious foreseer without the commitment to play the continuous role of the follower to your own emerging insight. It requires active, continuous participation.
It's the pathless path, demanding self-leadership, relentless reflection, and an acceptance of the continuous cycle of dissolution and rebirth.
And tying it back to the end goal, the integration of all four functions means you operate as that relational field. The 7-step process is the continuous, recursive loop of learning and structural resolution that builds and stabilizes that field. We began with the intentional disorientation of the source material,
which was designed to activate this structural awareness. So we leave you with one final thought, based on the author's invitation to step into practice now.
Think about the smallest structure in your daily life. This could be a recurring, anxious thought pattern, a specific linguistic habit that minimizes your power, or a feeling of predictable resistance you have toward a specific type of person.
Okay.
Now observe it, not with the intention to fix it, stop it, or judge it, but simply to witness its continuous interplay. Observing the structure of the pattern rather than getting lost in the content of the anxiety is the smallest, most foundational step toward activating true construct awareness.